Hey, welcome back to our channel. I'm Jared from 3C's Recreation, and today we're going to replace the fork seals on a Beta 125RR. This is the standard model, and this has the Sachs Open Cartridge Forks, so let's get right into it. The first thing you'll notice on this bike is how dirty the fork tubes are. These seals have been blown for quite a while. Customer just had a chance to bring the bike into us. And you'll see what happens is not only are we leaking fluid out of here, which is going to change the way the suspension works, our brakes are also now compromised. Our brake pads are soaked in oil. So for this customer, we're going to recommend front brake pads as well, because once the pads are soaked in oil, they'll never stop like they should. And we're also going to clean this rotor really well with some Scotch-Brite and starting fluid. So this is an example of a set of forks that needs to be replaced desperately. So we're going to get them off the bike and we'll get them changed. Before we remove the forks from the triple clamps, I like to crack the upper cap loose. It helps hold the fork tube still. But before we can spin this cap loose, we have to make sure we loosen the upper pinch bolts. So these are just a regular 10mm. And these should never be all that tight. There's gonna be torque settings when you put these back on your bike. So we're just gonna crack the uppers loose here. Now that that's loose, we can take our open end wrench on this style of fork. We can slide it in here and we'll crack this loose. Some bikes, you're going to use a regular cap wrench, but on the Open Cartridge Sachs from 2012 to 2018, this is what you're going to see. All right, so now we can go ahead with a service job now that the fork tube is clean. We may or may not need this drill bit depending on if our fork tube guide already has a hole in it or not. It's an update that Beta gave us to do. We got a 24mm socket, 19mm open end wrench. We got a pick tool, a flathead screwdriver. This is for my dampener rod, and I put that back together. This helps us adjust the oil level inside the fork tube. Our seal drivers, our seal bullet, this protects the fork tube when we put it back together. We got our grease, fork seals, cleaner, oil, rubber gloves, a ton of paper towels, our drain bucket, and I like to use cardboard on the counter just to keep everything clean. The first thing that we did was we noted where all of our adjusters were. We counted them for the customer and we backed them all the way out, rebound and compression. So those are both set back to fully out. So now we can go ahead and crack this open. So what we'll do is we'll use our 24mm, and we'd already cracked these loose on the top of the triple tree, so these should not be tight. We can loosen this all the way. We'll bring it over to our bucket and we'll let this drain out. Now that the oil is somewhat drained out, we can spin our rebound cap off the top. You'll see if you look down in here, this 19mm is going to fit down in here. So I'll pull down on the spring and I'll fit it right in the middle there. And then now I can take my 24mm and we'll back this off. And this should not be super tight. And as we do this, this is where you guys want to make sure everything is laid out exactly how it comes off. So I like to lay everything out. Spin this off of here. And you're gonna see some different washers on the inside of this cap, and we're gonna clean all this in a minute. So we've got a little spacer that might not want to come off quite yet. So that's on there. And then you're gonna see two washers, and keep in mind one of these has a hole in it. This one right here, the outer one. So keep this in mind. Goes just like this back on. Now that we've got this cracked, we can get our dampening rod out of the middle, if it'll come out quite yet. I might have to tip this up just a little bit. Keep in mind these dampening rods, you'll notice that the end of it has got an angle to it, so this has to go in. It's a certain way how this is going to go back together. With that out of the way, I can now release the spring and let that come out. And this is where the cardboard comes in handy, because everything's going to be pretty dirty here for a minute. So what you'll see, and this one is not cracked, but we need to put some holes in the bottom of this. That way it'll keep this from cracking with the oil pressure in the inside of it. So Beta has recommended we drill a 3mm hole on each side of this. And so we'll do that here in a minute. So we're going to spin this off. And for us, this is pretty much all the disassembly that we need to do on the internals. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pump this for a while to help get all the extra oil out of the middle of the compression rod on the inside. And you can see as I pump this, we're getting a lot more oil out. So I'm gonna spend a few minutes, probably 6 or 7 minutes, just kind of doing this to get the rest of that oil out of there. There's also a spring seat collar down inside of this tube where the spring will sit against. Sometimes that'll come out, sometimes it won't. If yours does come out, just put that back in before the spring goes out. This one seems pretty happy just being stuck in the bottom, so we're not going to try to remove it. Because I'm not removing the compression assembly here, I don't need to get that spring seat out. So the next thing we'll do is we'll remove the outer tube from the inner tube. We're now going to drop the dust seal down off the outer tube here, and you can just use a regular flathead screwdriver, kind of work its way in there, and you kind of pry in a couple different spots. And this is just the dust scraper. And next we're going to use a pick tool, because we have our clip in there that's holding the fork seal in, and you want to rotate this to find the end of the clip. And I'll show you what this clip looks like once I get it out. There's the end of it, and I just kind of work my way around it once I find the end of it, and that'll pop it out. So our clip, I just want to be careful with it because we'll reuse it. Our clip is out, and now some people would recommend putting some heat on this. But these bikes, usually, if you just give it a couple soft taps, the fork seal will pop right out. And now you'll see in this assembly, we got the fork seal, we got this washer, we got this bushing, and we got the upper bushing. So we're going to disassemble all of this. We're going to clean it all. So we're done with our outer fork tube. We're going to clean all that in a minute. So to get this off, I just take a screwdriver, I find the end of it, and just kind of gently pry it apart. And we're going to want to inspect this here in a minute to make sure our Teflon coating is okay on the outside. And we're going to lay this all down in the order that it comes off. So there's 1, 2, 3. It's important to pay attention to this fork seal, how it comes off. So when you put your new one back on, so we're going to go down with it like that. We're going to peel these 2 off, that one, and then our dust scraper. So I'm now going to take a minute and I'm going to get all this clean, and we'll show you guys reassembly. So now that everything's been disassembled, it's all cleaned, ready to go back together. We got all of our Teflon, it all looks good on the outside of this one. The Teflon on the inside of this one looks good, so we can reassemble. So we're going to start with a fork seal first. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our bullet protector, we're going to put this right on the end of the fork tube here. Now I like to take a little bit of fork oil, and we're going to coat all this down so our seals don't scrape down the fork tube. So put a little bit of oil down this. It's important to inspect these fork tubes too while you're doing this, make sure there's no major nicks. This bike's got quite a bit of time on it, and even so, it's been raced a lot, it still looks really good. So we got our dust scraper, we're going to go in reverse operation. We're going to put some grease on this. And we're going to slide it back on. We got our clip, we'll add that next. We have our new fork seal, and please make sure when you put this back together, you know how it goes. This goes down, and again, we're going to put some grease on the seal itself. We got that looking good. We'll slide that over here. And with that on, we can now take our steel bullet back off. We can go with our washer. And we can do our last 2 bushings. And the smaller one is just going to click right into its groove, so we'll just slide it right in here. And it'll click right in. So now we can take our outer fork tube and reinstall it here. So now we can reinstall our outer fork tube, and we cleaned everything up. It looks really good. We'll slide this in, so we got to keep this inner bushing, kind of pinch it a little bit so it slides over it. And now I'll spin this around. We have to set this bushing and this washer in there first. So what I like to do is just use our fork seal drivers first here. And you can see that's already set in there nicely. Might be hard to tell on the GoPro, but it's way deep. It's up in there like it should be in its channel. And we're now going to take our fork seal itself. We'll get this out of the way. And we'll slide our fork seal down. And we'll use our fork seal drivers here. Some people again say you should use heat on this. These ones usually go in pretty easy. Just a couple of taps. It's in past the groove for the lock ring here. We can put our clip back in next. Slide this down a little bit. Get the clip started. It's easier if it's on the table. I can use two hands. And I usually have like a little screwdriver that I'll use here as well. Let me find that. And now I'll just push it down. You want to hear the click. Make sure it's in its channel. That clicked in nice, and I always like to visually inspect it to make sure I'm happy with it, and it is. And while we're doing this, you can see this outer ring. This is where your outer fork guard will rub on here. This one's still in good shape. It's starting to get a little bit of an indent there. So I'm just going to rotate this clip on the outer fork tube when I put this back together. And now it's just a matter of getting our dust seal to push up in. So we just take our upper fork tube and push it down, and you'll see it sets it down on there nicely. It's reinstalled. So our fork seals are back together, and now we can start with the internal installation here. So now we're ready to reinstall our spring guide, but first we need to make those holes that Beta recommends. And keep in mind, all these service manuals are on the Beta USA website, so if you want to follow along and actually look at pictures on how to do this, I'm going to put a 3mm hole here, and I'm going to put a 3mm hole here. I kind of started some indents just to show you guys exactly where they go. So now I can lay this down. There's one, and we'll clean out the inside here in a second. And the second one. So now we got our two holes that are going to relieve the oil, and I'm going to take my air jazzer and we're going to push this out to make sure everything looks good. We can also go ahead and use a larger drill bit and run it on the inside to help get those plastic pieces from the inside out of there as well. So we'll now clean this out with the air jazzer. So now our spring guide is screwed back on, and we screwed down as far as it'll go. We'll now take our push rod, we'll install this as well. And we use our rod dampener tool, so now we're going to fill this with oil. So I'm going to set that there. We're going to take and fill this all the way up with fork oil. So our oil is basically all the way to the top, and I'm going to take our push rod and I'm going to go up and down with it, because right now there's no resistance to it. It is not full of oil. So we need to work this rod up and down 15 to 20 times. And then once we do this, we need to let the oil settle before we make our measurement on the top here. Okay, our oil's been sitting for about 10 minutes, so it's settled at the bottom. There's no more air bubbles that we're worried about. We're momentarily going to unscrew this so we can set our oil level inside the fork tube. This bike, we're going to set it right in the middle. There's different settings, but we're going to go right to 115 is right where in the middle on this bike. So now we can set this down in here. Without our spring, we should note the spring is still out of the bike. And we're going to pull up on this, and it's going to suck all the extra oil out of the top here. And you can hear it there, we just hit the end of it. So that's all the oil, that's all the extra oil that's going to come back out. We can now re-screw our rod dampener tool on. This tool is really handy now, because now when I go to put my spring on, the spring can sit all the way down on there. We'll grab our 19mm. And without this tool, you're trying to work this cap all the way up through, and it can be kind of a challenge sometimes. So now I'm going to hold it up. I'm going to get my 19 to sit on there, and we're now done with this tool. This is where we need to reinstall our cap, and as we took it apart, we kept track of where all these washers were and how they were sitting. Make sure you got that little steel spacer on the outside to set against the spring. You want to make sure that this bottoms out threading in before it hits the nut. So there it is. Before it hits the jam nut, it just bottomed all the way out. That way we're not messing with our rebound adjustment or having a false rebound adjustment. So now that that's going to be there, We're going to tighten this jam nut up against the bottom here. And now pull our 19mm back out. We can raise our outer fork tube up. We can screw our cap back on. These do not need to be overly tight because your upper triple clamp is going to help pinch this and keep this tight. So you do not need to torque that too hard. Thanks for watching. This was Jared from 3 C's Recreation. We did an example of how to do one fork tube, but on the 2012 to 2018s, it's identical for the second fork tube. We've already done that one as well. Keep in mind, if you have a 2019 or newer, it's a separate fork. You have rebound on one side and compression on the other. So just look for the service manual for your exact bike. If you need any beta parts, give us a call. We're 3 C's Recreation. Thanks for watching.